So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Stan Phelps. Hi, Stan.
How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. So, Stan, for the benefit of our readers and listeners, can you tell us a bit about you and the work that you do?
Sure. I have a marketing consultancy called 9 Inch Marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing personal with the 9 inches or the 23 centimeters. That represents the average distance between the brain, the stem of your brain,
Uh-huh.
and the top of your heart.
I like it.
And I tell people, Adrian, that's the longest and hardest 9 inches in marketing.
I think
And
that's
so
very true.
what I do, I write, I speak, and I work with brands around two critical areas. One being the customer experience,
Uh-huh.
and the second being employee engagement.
Fantastic. Music to my ears.
Right.
So, now you've recently published your second book, is that right? And that's called "What's Your Green Goldfish." That came out just end of last month. Is that right? About just
Correct.
over a month ago.
Right. End of March. Correct. And the second book in a trilogy.
Okay.
The first was Purple Goldfish, or What's Your Purple Goldfish? And purple was all about the customer.
Uh huh.
Green is all about the employee.
Right.
And I mentioned trilogy. The last one will be gold, which is what do you do for your top 20% of
Okay.
customers and employees?
Okay. Fantastic. And the reason why you wrote it is, I mean, is it just about the work that you do, or is this a collection of thoughts and ideas, or is it a manifesto, or what?
Well,
What's the raison d'être behind the book, Stan?
sure. My behind the trilogy is I firmly believe, Adrian, that marketing needs to shift.
Okay.
And marketing should be more about employees and the customer
Okay.
and less about the quarterly earnings and the shareholders.
Okay.
And I think for far too long, much too much emphasis of marketing was based on the eyes and the ears,
Right.
and not enough was about doing the little extras that connect emotionally and get to the heart of both employees and customers.
And is it because is it that sort of reason and that sort of rising sort of realization? Is that why you think employee engagement is rising up the agenda, or is this just another? Have people connected the dots? I guess is my short question, or is it just another? People are seeing employee engagement as just another thing that they have to do on their checklist, as it were.
Well, I firmly believe employee engagement can be a competitive differentiator
Uh
for a
huh.
firm. And if you look at a lot of the studies, companies that have engaged employees grow upwards of 3 times as fast as their competitors.
Yeah, I've seen some of that research.
And I know it's similar in the UK, but here in the US, there's truly an engagement crisis. We
Okay.
have nearly 70% of workers are either not engaged or actively disengaged when it comes to their work.
Right.
So literally, they've already quit, Adrian. They just haven't left their job.
They're just punching in and punching out, I guess.
And if you can create an engaged workplace, you have more productive employees, you have more satisfied employees, and you create an environment or a culture that people want to be part of.
Right.
Start to get better talent. And becoming a best place to work, pretty soon, if you can do that, you start to get the best customers. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it does. I agree with that. It does become a virtuous circle.
So it's, the idea that the simple premise that happy employees lead to happy customers.
Yeah, no, it all flows downhill. It really does. So tell me, I mean, diving into the book, I mean, I read the title and I thought, green goldfish? What's that all about? Why green? Why goldfish?
Well, let's talk colors first.
Okay.
The colors are purple, green, and gold. And that's a direct reference to Mardi Gras.
Ah, okay.
That happens to be the three colors of Mardi Gras. The overriding concept that drives this, Adrian, is a word called lanyap.
Yeah, well, that's great because you've just told me how to pronounce it because I wasn't exactly sure.
So if you, it's hard to pronounce and even more difficult to spell. But I tell people if phonetically it would be Lanyap,
Okay,
lanyap.
lanyap.
And
Okay,
lanyap is a Creole word, so it comes from the reference to Mardi Gras. It comes from Louisiana, and it literally translates to the gift
okay,
or to give a little bit more. And what I found, I firmly believe that the biggest myth in marketing is the idea of just meeting the expectations of your customer.
uh huh.
And that no one ever meets expectations, Adrian. You either exceed expectations or you fall short. No one just meets expectations. And so it's the idea of becoming kind of talkable by design,
Right.
creating these little things that you can do that plus up the experience, both on the customer side and on the employee side. So the colors are a direct reference to southeastern United States and this Creole word called lanyap.
Okay.
Now, goldfish is pretty interesting. I wanted something that was small.
Okay.
We're talking about the little things that can make a big difference. And as I started to study the goldfish, I got unbelievably excited about what I found. And it's amazing. An average goldfish, and I don't know about you, Adrian, when you went to maybe the fair as a kid and you won a goldfish,
Yeah.
I mean, they're literally just a couple inches. You know, that's what I thought the average goldfish was, which is roughly about 3 or 4 inches. The Guinness Book of World Records, nearly 20 inches.
Right. Wow.
I said to him, that would be like walking down the street and bumping into somebody who's 3 stories tall. And I
Yeah.
said to myself, how can there be such a difference between this 3 incher and this massive monster at 20 inches? And it turns out there are 5 different ways that a goldfish grows.
Okay.
I saw a lot of parallels with business, Adrian.
Okay.
And I'll take you through the 5 real quick. The
Okay.
first, we've all heard this. The size of the pond or the bowl will determine how big the goldfish can grow.
And that's my dad, funnily enough, got interested in koi carp at one
Okay?
point, and it's exactly the same thing happens with koi carp. As the koi will grow as big as the environment that you put them into,
Right.
and
It's
the number of carp that it shares the environment with.
right. So if you think about simply in business, what's the size of the bowl or the pond? It's the size of your market.
Yeah. Sure.
The second thing is, and I don't know if your dad realized this, the amount of koi that you put in the bowl or pond, the amount of koi that's in there will also determine how big that goldfish or that koi can get.
Sure.
So what's that in business? That's your competition.
Uh huh.
And then the clarity of the water, so the amount of nutrients in the water, how clear the water is, will also determine how that goldfish can grow. So in business, that's maybe, say, the economy
Yeah.
or the business environment, the ability to get capital, consumer confidence. The fourth thing is how a goldfish does in its first 120 days will determine how it can grow.
Okay. It's all about the start.
Like, yeah, so exactly in business, that would either be a startup or, say, a new product introduction. How it does in those first 4 months is key to its future growth.
Okay.
And the fifth thing is the genetic makeup of the goldfish will determine how it can grow. So how it's differentiated from all of the other goldfish in that bowl or pond.
Okay.
And if you think about it in business, if you're already in business, especially over 4 months, you have no control over the market. certainly no control over your competitors, unless you're buying them, I guess.
Uh-huh.
No control over the economy for sure. If you've already been in business for 120 days, what's the only thing you have control over?
Yourself.
Yourself, and how you differentiate yourself and how you stand out, as I say, in a sea of sameness.
Sure. Okay.
So these are the little things, again, goldfish being small, but the little things that you can do to add value and stand out.
Okay.
And that inspired me in how I've written both of the books is actually by starting a project, Adrian.
Okay.
So I first started the Purple Goldfish Project. I collected 1,001 examples of companies that did the little extras.
Okay.
Now, I probably should have taken advice that someone once gave me about cross-country skiing.
Okay.
Have you ever done cross-country skiing?
No.
This is good. You'll appreciate this. They say if you're ever going to start out with cross-country skiing, start with a small country.
Oh. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So I probably shouldn't have picked 1,001. It took me almost 2.5 years on Purple to collect those examples. But having such a breadth of examples that I crowdsourced, I was able to see distinct patterns
Mm-hmm.
or types.
Okay.
And that's how kind of the book is laid out, is taking the best examples from the 12 types of purple and the 15 different types of green.
I mean, so I went into the book and I tell you what it felt like. It felt like you've described the different types of the ingredients of a green goldfish, and then the different types, and then I turned the next page, and it was almost like turning on a hose pipe. I was like, it was like, I was like, I got flooded with all these examples, and I was thinking, blimey, and then all these different types, and I was thinking to myself, cracky. I mean, fantastic piece of work in terms of collecting all of these little sort of stories, and all, as I sometimes think about things, little nudges to do things and
Right.
bits of inspiration and things. But I guess my question would be: is like 15 types. I mean, do all companies have to try and achieve all of these, or just some of them?
You know, I'll tell you what, the great companies, Adrian, and you look as say for like a highlight example for green would be Google.
Right.
I mean, Google really, they're so known for going above and beyond for their employees. They literally touch all 15 types. And it's the same thing for my Hall of Famers on Purple, is that they just don't do one thing. When you look at Zappos, Southwest Airlines, Enterprise, and a whole host of others, they don't have just one goldfish. They literally have a whole school.
Right.
But what's interesting is that, I tell people you don't want to look at this like a Trojan horse.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
You don't want to have to roll out like 10 different changes all at once.
No.
The beauty with doing these little small things, it allows you to kind of innovate, Adrian. And if you can tackle one area at a time and kind of roll them out, see how they're kind of accepted or valued, it gives you the ability to kind of collectively, when you add them up, to really make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, you going back to your fair example. You talk about going to the fair and collecting or winning goldfish.
Right.
I always think about going to the fair and saying go to the circus and seeing the guy spinning plates.
Right.
And I use that example when I'm talking to people sometimes, and they go, "What do you mean?" And I say, "Well, how many plates does the guy start with?"
One.
Exactly. And I said, "Well, what happens if he starts with more than one?" And they go, and I go like, "Well, broken crockery, and it turns into a Greek wedding."
Right.
You know,
Right.
and so you get good at spinning one, and when you get good at spinning one, then you can start adding the second one, and it's all about building up competency, right?
Right. And on the green side of the equation, and it seems like a lot, 15 different types, but essentially I've categorized them in 3 different categories.
Hmm.
So the majority are in a category I call the basics.
Okay.
So that's things like, what do you do with new employees to help onboard them to the company?
Okay.
Little things like food and beverage, things like the actual space or the design of the office can have a big impact.
Hmm.
Um, things like time off policies, things that you can probably make, little, very easy changes to, Adrian.
Hmm.
The next group, so that's the basics. The next group is things that create a sense of belonging. So
Okay.
that would be things like recognition programs,
Okay.
team team building programs, um, things you can do from a flexibility perspective. They're a little, granted, that's going to take a little more work,
Yeah.
but that's going to create that sense of belonging, which is so key for engaged employees. And then the last kind of 3 inches, I kind of talk about the 9 inches to get to the heart. The last 3 inches are those that create us really are building. The last B is building.
Okay.
That's things like training and development programs,
Okay.
things like how can you pay it forward as an organization and help employees give back. And then lastly, the last step is how can you do things that empower employees.
Okay.
And so you literally can start with the basics and kind of work your way down.
Okay. And all of this sort of stuff, the impetus behind all of this stuff and starting new initiatives. I mean, does that come directly from leadership, or does it have to start with them, or can it start anywhere?
I think initially it needs to start at the highest level, and it can't just be talk. There needs to be action that's behind it.
Right.
And so I think you have organizations that literally, when you look at a lot of kind of employee-centric organizations, you really have a founder that's put that directly in the crosshairs, that's important.
Right.
And I love to tell the story. I don't know if you've heard the story of Larry Page, who's with Sergey Brin, were the 2 founders of Google.
Uh-huh.
And Larry Page had spoke at a graduation ceremony a few years back at Michigan, and he talked about his granddad, Adrian. And his granddad worked in an automobile plant in Flint, Michigan. And literally every day when his grandfather went to work, he brought with him what they call an alley-oop hammer.
Right. I saw the picture of this in the book, actually.
Which is literally a steel pipe with molten lead on the end of the pipe. And he brought it because of protection. They used to do things like sit-down strikes.
Right.
And Larry Page said, isn't it wonderful that we live in an economy today where people don't have to bring blunt objects to work?
Yeah.
And it even takes it one step further. At Google, they look at it and say, we would want our employees to come here every day, even if it wasn't for a paycheck. Even if they didn't need a paycheck, they'd want to feel that what they were doing was making an impact and was meaningful and in an environment where they were appreciated.
Yeah.
And so it really needs to come from the top. But I'll tell you, Adrian, some of the most interesting innovation comes from the bottom level.
Sure.
And there's a few great stories from a South African insurance company called Etana in the book.
Okay.
And they really make it a point to give a lot of, they empower the frontline employees to do new things. And then once they see those things, they jump in and try to support it every way they can.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting is that I would encourage people particularly when we're thinking about things like this, is that many people join businesses and they sort of sometimes they get overwhelmed by all these new initiatives and they keep coming out, but sometimes they also feel that there's not enough
Right.
initiative kind of happening. And I would suggest to people that actually you can't waste your time waiting for other people to do stuff. If you we all have our own responsibility, one for our own engagement, but also shaping our own environment.
Right.
Whether you work in a team or you've got a small team and you're responsible for them, then their engagement and your engagement personally is your responsibility. And therefore
Absolutely.
it can actually start on a really micro level. And so I think that it's almost a bit like I believe that engagement can in many ways can be quite viral. It's a bit like it
Right.
can be like a virus, and so you can actually start showing people how to do things differently.
Right.
You don't need to wait for permission. You just start do things, and then things will start to spread.
Right. Right. And again, I think the key is if you have an environment that encourages that, and of course, there are going to be mistakes that are going to be made
Yeah,
along the way, but you have to be able to embrace that. And then again, I think what the key thing that Atana does is that once they see something that's working, then they jump in and support it with everything they need.
absolutely.
So there's a great example in the book of, and it's kind of a funny example. One of, fun is kind of at the center of how this company works. And one of the employees lost a bet. It was some type of sporting bet. And what he had to do in terms of paying off the bet, Adrian, was to get down in one of these little speedos
Okay.
and run just with the speedo, run down this kind of high street in Johannesburg in the middle of the day.
I hasten to add that we have to qualify what a speedo is because in the UK, if you talk about speedo or speedos,
Right,
it's a skimpy pair of swimming trunks.
right, really tight fitting. Pair of, somebody referred to it as a budgie smuggler.
Yeah, that's it. Those as well.
But what Itana did was they saw this opportunity. The senior management jumped in and they said, "That's great. Let's try to get some more employees to get behind this." And they literally created this race that's now went on for like 4 or 5 years, where it started with just a group of like 20 Itana employees, but now it's literally thousands of people that man up in these red speedos, and they raise money for cancer research, for things like prostate cancer and other male type of cancers. So it's again just an interesting way to be able to come in, look at what's happening, and then be able to support it from the top down.
That's a great story. Now, I think the thing that I would then ask, because when I speak to different sort of people and different executives and different companies and things, there's this. Oftentimes there's a culture of email and projects and back-to-back meetings and all of these different sort of things, and I would, if I was to suggest some of these things to people, they would be, God, when do I have time to do that? And that feels like so hard. So,
Right.
in your experience, if you were giving advice to an executive or a leader who's listening into this, whether they're in a big company or they're an entrepreneur running a smaller organization, where would you say would be a good place to start?
It's a good question. I think where you might have the most impact is on a simple thing, which is recognition.
Right.
Like to me, that's one thing that can be one of the paradigm shifts in the book, Adrian, is that recognition shouldn't be an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
That recognition, if done the right way, can be a driver of performance.
Yes, completely agree.
And if you look at the studies, the teams that seem to be the most engaged and the most productive, there's a high level of recognition in those teams. So, you can't do it too soon and you can't do it too often.
Yeah.
And I love the companies, and there are a lot of great examples in the book, that figure out the values of the company that they want to really push forward, and they'll create some type of an award that ties into that, company value.
Yeah, I mean, I
It's
think I could completely agree. I think there's, but also I think some people shy away from the whole recognition thing because of their preconceived ideas of what it means or what they've seen other people doing. And I think what the important thing for me is that actually recognition is a relative term relative to your culture. So it doesn't always have to be a whoop whoop sort of thing or high fiving or big
right,
awards or anything else. It could be very, very simple and very sort of different, but very much aligned with how you do things in your particular organization. So it's not necessarily about copying people. It's more about saying this works. Figure
right,
out how to make it work for you.
right, and figure out ways that systematically you can build it into kind of your overall. So if you have a weekly meeting, to be able to spend a couple of minutes, maybe recognizing somebody in the group, or just talking about somebody who's an example of somebody who's lived the values of the organization. You know, building it into these weekly things allows people to be reminded of the values of the organization and reinforcing it, because it's literally 95% of this, Adrian, is just reminding people of how important it is and recognizing people that are doing the right things to create that environment.
Sure, sure. It's I mean, and doing it's doing the sort of things that it's almost like just being the best human being that you can be.
Right,
Really,
right,
really simple stuff, and not getting caught up with things, and actually remembering that business is done with people, and it's done with people for other people.
right, right. And you talk about what are the little things that they can do to make a big difference. One of the takeaways in the book is that there's not enough emphasis placed on leadership development
Sure.
and preparing managers to be able to lead effectively is one of the biggest takeaways. 70% of people who quit a job in the US don't quit their job, they quit their boss.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
And so literally, if you can get to a situation where you're empowering these managers and constantly working on their development, that's going to have that ripple effect for all of their reports and create the environment that you need for engagement.
Fantastic. So, Stan, just in the interest of time and things, and sort of starting to wrap things up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything that comes to mind that you say, here's some top tips that I think I'd like to share with your readers and listeners?
Well, I would say this. You had mentioned it in both of the books. There's literally hundreds of examples,
Mm-hmm.
and to your point, it could feel like kind of drinking from the fire hose. But the worst thing, you don't want to go and just get out the Xerox machine and start copying away. That doesn't make sense. There are ingredients or rules for creating these little extras, and just go out and try to create stuff and take action.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, you start spinning the plate one at a time.
Yeah.
You would never start. I love that analogy. You would never start with seven.
No.
Roll it out one at a time. You know what? If they don't stick, it's not like you made a big fanfare about it.
No.
So what I want people to do is literally, move towards action. And this type of thing isn't like liposuction. It's a commitment. It's not a campaign.
Yeah, I think that's also, I think that's a really important point where you talk about, and when you start something, don't necessarily expect to see manifest, demonstrable results straight away. It takes time to
Right.
create change,
Right.
and it takes time for things to stick.
But it's absolutely key, and again, it's a commitment. It's not a campaign.
Absolutely. So, Stan, final question that I always ask people when I interview them on this podcast series. and that is, what would you like to shamelessly plug?
Well, first off, if you're interested in learning more about both of the projects in the books, I would highly recommend people to go to my site, which is number 9inchmarketing.com. So 9inchmarketing.com. You'll have all of the information on. There's a lot of free resources there, and ultimately, if you're interested, you can get both books. What's Your Purple Goldfish and What's Your Green Goldfish on Amazon in both physical book and ebook platform.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Make sure that all gets linked up, and when it's all goes live, I'll push it all out and give you a big shout out on both on 9 Inch Marketing and also the Goldfish series.
Great. Thank you, Adrian.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much. There's a lot of stuff in there. That's really, really, really great. I just want to congratulate you on your 1,001 examples.
Well, I still have one more book to go, and I'm going to try to do the 1,001 examples a third time. I obviously haven't learned my cross-country skiing lesson.
Well, you are breaking trail for people that are coming behind you, Stan.
You know what they say about pioneers, Adrian?
Well, indeed. You never
want to be a pioneer.
They're also a little bit smart and a little bit crazy.
Right.
All right, Stan. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Adrian.